Well. It is the season, folks. It is the season. And as I mentioned in my last video, the case for Santa Claus, it is that time of year, and I'm going to be doing some videos kind of relevant to the season. So if you didn't get a chance to watch my video yet on the case for Santa Claus, I want to really encourage you to do that. Of course, uh, what I'm wanting to present in that video is really just the extreme importance to all of us as human beings and to the human psyche, human psychology that we have powerful mythology, powerful stories to tell, and how important those stories are to the psychological health of who we are as human beings and to our families and our communities and even our nation. All right, and so yeah, have a listen to that. And as I pull together some new and old ideas, but of course the story of Santa Claus is an old one and a very powerful one. So have a listen. Today, I wanted to talk about another word that we use frequently, especially during this time of season, this time of the year, the spirit of the season, if you will. Then that word is forgiveness. You know, you think about this time of the year, the spirit of this season, Christmas, the holidays, and you think of other words like love, caring, generosity, charity, benevolence, joy. You know, there are many words that speak to the spirit of this season, and certainly forgiveness is one of those. And if you don't know who I am, my name is John Solano. I'm a family counselor. I have been since over the last 10 years, but I've been a professional counselor for over 30 years. And so um, I've developed some ideas. I've had my successes, I guess you could say, and people have always requested more information on how they can learn more, how they can kind of get their heads around a little bit more of what I've been saying. So I constructed this YouTube channel where I've got 50, 60, 70 videos on it now that I've created just because people have asked me for more information, parents and just everybody. So, um, and I like to be pretty practical in what I'm talking about, although some of the ideas that I bring together are pretty intense sometimes. But anyway, this idea of forgiveness seems to be a very popular one. It's one that we talk about a lot, especially when it comes to families. But we certainly hear a lot about it too when it comes to healing and recovery and how important it is not only to forgive others, but to forgive ourselves. That being said, it's hard. It's tough. You know, I mean, just yesterday, I was talking to a young person about forgiveness and how difficult it is. So, you know, I wonder if we make it too difficult. Part of my job as a counselor is to try to offer people a different position, a different perspective. You know, the way forgiveness is often seen is that, you know, people maybe have difficulty doing it because they feel like if they forgive somebody for a hurt that was committed against them, that somehow justice isn't served, that somehow the person gets away with the crime. And so they say, I don't think I can ever forgive this one. Certain things I can forgive, but this one I can't forgive. And that's what you often hear. And when I was talking to this young person the other day, they were talking about how there had been there had been some things that had gone on in the family that had been really hurtful, and they just felt they couldn't let it go. You know, that justice had to be served. And of course, this young person was not feeling good. And, again, the family relationships were in tension and conflict. And there was tension and conflict on the inside of this young person. And so they weren't feeling good personally and mentally and otherwise. And they wanted to feel better. But they said, I just can't forgive. I just can't let go of this. And I said, well, maybe it's because just kind of traditionally, our traditional perspective on understanding is maybe a bit off. I said, well, what would help you forgive? And this young person said, well, if only my parents would just be accountable, just admit what they did and apologize, just really sincerely apologize. That would just go a long ways. That would just really be helpful. And what this young person is requesting seems pretty normal, right? I mean, if somebody hurts you, you want them to be accountable. You want them to admit that they did it and to apologize. I've said in previous videos that, you know, we all like to say nobody's perfect. I'm not perfect. Yet we don't live that way really. But we like to say that nobody's perfect. That's the reality. The reality is that human beings, we're always going to be stepping on each other's toes. We're always going to be hurting each other. So how do we live with one another then? If this is true, how do we forgive? Well, it seems like the traditional recipe, and a very helpful one, is to admit what we did and apologize. But what this young person was saying to me is that the parents wouldn't do it. They wouldn't admit to what they did. They wouldn't apologize. And that their way of being was even hurtful. And they weren't willing to be, increase their awareness of that or do anything about it. And that's where a lot of people are. That's where a lot of us are. It's the human condition. We step on each other's toes all the time, but some people just don't want to admit it. Some people don't want to say they're sorry. And there can be a lot of reasons for that. Pride could be a reason. Fear could be a reason. Or just, simple lack of awareness. That's often the case when people have a trauma history, come from being hurt. The human mind is very complex and can be very deceptive in terms of how it presents certain things, if you will. We don't have insight on all of our agendas and the reasons why we do what we do. Many of those are subconscious, even unconscious. And people are in different levels of consciousness, if you will, different levels of awakening. And for some of you, like many of you who join me on my Tuesday night parent leadership group, we are very intentional and very proactive in increasing our awareness. And each week we come into the presence of wisdom teachings that help us do that. And sometimes we find out things about ourselves that we didn't necessarily want to find out or like to find out, but we do believe that the truth will set you free. And certainly the families that I work with who are in turmoil need to be set free of that. And the truth can do that. But how and when that gets spoken is often out of our control. So for this young person, it became so very important to offer a different position, because the position that they were seeing in that particular moment was that the only way they could ever be happy was if somebody would come forward and admit and say sorry. But that could take years, and it may never happen. Some of you know this. Some of you have been hurt. Some of you have been deeply disappointed, deeply betrayed by family, by your parents, by your siblings, by a close friend. And this person, for whatever reason, has just not come forward and owned what they did and apologized. And we hang on to that, thinking that the only way to be free of this unhappiness, of this prison cell is if the other person releases us, gives us reason, if you will. But I said to this young person, what if we could see, excuse me, what if we could see this whole thing of forgiveness in a different way? What if it wasn't about getting something from somebody else? Here, let me explain it to you. And so I explained it a little bit like this. I said, isn't it true that just kind of naturally, any animal, any of us as human beings, that when we're wounded, we contract, we pull away, we want to protect ourselves, right? So when people are wounded, there's this movement of contraction that occurs, right? It's like when somebody hurts us, we kind of withdraw, we retract, we like a turtle go into our shell, and when we go into our shell, when we go behind a protective wall of defenses or whatever they are, who we really are just is no longer present in the world. And yet, to be truly who we are and to be present in the world is the best gift that we can give ourselves. It's the best gift that we can give our family and our communities. What some people say, be yourself or be your best self. And yet, much of that true self or best self that we are can be hidden behind barriers and defenses that we've created in order to, what we might think is to keep ourselves safe. We contract. Another way of saying it, or I may have added this to the story, which is I do a lot of work here, folks. If you've seen some of the videos on this idea of everybody has this internal code of honor, this code of honor comprised of various wonderful virtues, such as love, caring, compassion, empathy, forgiveness. These wonderful virtues that we carry within us that we might say is really a reflection of our best self, our true self. When we're really being ourselves, we really embody this and live it out in the world. And when we say live it out, it means make a contribution. All these virtues that we have inside, people will say, well, I stand for respect or, integrity or accountability or maturity or whatever it is. All these virtues that we say we hold dear. So imagine people say they hold dear certain virtues. Where do you hold them? Where you hold them dear, well, it must be close to your heart. So we have these wonderful virtues, and they're like gifts, especially this time of the season. Think about that. They're like gifts. They would be gifts to the world. If you could embody these virtues, it would be a gift to the world. It would be a gift to yourself. It would be a gift to your family. It would be the best gift. We call that being a person of integrity. Just being true to yourself and keeping your word from day to day. Embodying those virtues is what integrity means. And yet, when we feel hurt, when we think we've been hurt, we contract. And so all those wonderful gifts that we're here to give, that we're here to share with our families and our communities, all these gifts, we end up keeping to ourselves. We end up keeping those on the inside, and it hurts us. It hurts us that we can't give those gifts. You see, this young person was saying, I am a caring person, but because they don't care about me, why should I care about them? Well, they hurt me, well, I guess I'll hurt them. They disrespected me, I guess I'll disrespect them. So not only is this young person not giving the gifts, they're giving something toxic now into the world. And those gifts of caring and empathy and love that this young person has, they're still there, but they're just buried. They're just kind of covered up. They've contracted. She's contracted. And that's very painful. And it can lead to a lot of anxiety and depression and other mental health issues and physical issues. when we're no longer being ourselves, right? And so when somebody forgives, think about the definition of this. The definition of forgiveness is giving forth. So for means forward, obviously giving means to give. So to give forth of our virtues, of our giftedness, for the sake of ourself. Well, one could say, well, which self? Our best self. So forgiveness means giving forth of myself for the sake of myself, but not my little ego self. It's for my best self. And that is a difficult thing, but one of the most mature aspects of who we are as humans. What does that mean? It means to give to others, to love others, to care for others when they're not giving to us, when they're not loving us, when they don't care about us. You see, to the immature mind, that's crazy, isn't it? Why should I give? As I was saying, this young person was going, why should I care about them? They don't care about me. So this gift of caring that they had wasn't making it through into the world. Why? Because they weren't caring back. Parents weren't caring back. In other words, an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Live by the sword, die by the sword. And that's what the immature mind, that's where the immature mind sets up camp. A mature mind can keep loving, keep caring, keep forgiving, even when it is under attack. Why? Because the giving is not for the other person. The giving is a gift to oneself. In other words, to be true to yourself no matter what. To be true to yourself, even if you're under attack. To be true to yourself, to continue to care, to continue to show respect, even when you're not being respected. One of my teachers used to say, John, you know, who needs respect when you're being respected? It's when you're disrespected where you get to see what you're made of. You get to see the depth of your roots. You get to see the depth of your character. When it hits the fan, that's where we're tested. And that's the test of maturity right there. And this is what I wanted to help this young person see. Forgiveness and her release from her pain is not about whether or not she will receive an apology from her parents. It's about whether she loves herself enough to do the right thing for her best self, for her most authentic, noble, true self. This is what we call unconditional. You know, at this time of year, especially, and parents often talk about the unconditional love they have for their children. You know, we don't say, I'll love my children subject to this. I'll love my children as long as this. We say it's unconditional. And that is a very radical position to take, a very mature position to take. It takes a lot of strength, a lot of character to continue to love without subject, but to love just because that's what you said you would do. Remember, integrity is about keeping your word. And when we can keep our word to our best self, that's what forgiveness is. To give forth of myself for the sake of my best self. Period. For the sake of my best self. Now, one of the pieces of the season that we could add to this is, you know, an honest look at ourself. And this is what I'm saying. We don't give forth of ourselves for the sake of our ego self, if you want to call it that, because that part of us is ornery. We're out of integrity all the time. We're selfish all the time. We're self-obsessed all the time. I don't forgive for that part of myself. I forgive for a greater self, if you will, a greater part of myself. And what is this greater part of myself? Well, this greater part of myself is the part of myself that can love me unconditionally, that can love me in spite of all my defects, all my selfishness, all my self-obsession, all my indulgences. That part of me that is my best is divine in nature. It can love me in spite of me. Why? Because it has a promise to do so. It is from that wellspring that we can love others in the same way. You see, this young person would have difficulty releasing parents, would have difficulty letting it go because she would not be able to find that within herself. But with a connection from that authentic true self, that most divine part of ourselves that can love us in spite of our absolute defectiveness, if you want to call it that, the fact that we're out of integrity hundreds of times a day. Remember, I said earlier, we like to say nobody's perfect or I'm not perfect, but very few people want to embrace that, want to live it out. And here's an opportunity to live it out. Don't run from it, because this is the doorway to being loved unconditionally and to be able to love others unconditionally. If you only love yourself, you know, this is kind of like a narcissist. I mean, a narcissist thinks that they're the end all be all and perfect, and consequently they love themselves. But if a narcissist began to realize that they weren't perfect, they couldn't love themselves. They would crumble, they would fall apart, they wouldn't have the capacity to love themselves. You see, that love must come from a bigger part of ourselves, a more true, more divine part of ourselves. Our immature ego, our immature mind, our immature state, we can't love ourselves. But something bigger, something more divine in us can. And when this young person starts to figure this out, they'll be free. They'll be able to love those parents and forgive. Remember, forgiveness means to give forth of oneself. Why? To give forth? Why is that necessary? Because I have contracted. I have pulled away. I've become obsessed with myself. I'm preoccupied with myself. And so I contract. That causes us pain as human beings. But I've made my release from my pain conditional upon somebody else's personal accountability and responsibility. That's the mistake, because we might not get that in a lifetime. There are ways out. There is a way out. And it is the season. It is the spirit of the season. Forgiveness is possible. Absolutely. So I hope this video has been helpful for you to begin to explore, understand a different way of looking at the idea of forgiveness, and be able to also just open yourself to the spirit of the season, right? Where we begin to contemplate more intentionally, if you will, the divine and what is absolutely possible. Very unique to us as human beings. It's the time of miracles. It's the time of gift giving. But for a long time, people have felt, I guess you could say, disheartened in the season because maybe it's become over consumerized. I mean, we can't blame products. It's the people who go out and buy them, and we sometimes focus on the money we spend or the gifts that we buy rather than the real gifts that would make a difference. It's the gifts of the heart, those virtues and values that we hold dear: tenderness, love, compassion. One of the pieces of advice that I give to people who want to go down this path is the idea that, when you live in families and communities, even, you become a little predictable in your love, in the way that you love, or just you become predictable in yourself. You just develop habits and patterns. I always say to parents, you're predictable. And you're predictable in not a good way. Maybe your kids are already predicting how you're going to walk in the door tonight. Dad's going to be grumpy, mom's going to be irritated, whatever. You're already predicted. Well, how about doing something completely out of character? Give a gift. I don't mean go to the store and get a gift. I mean, give one of those virtues. Take some leadership today. What would blow your family's mind? Or is there a particular person in your family who you're having some conflict or some tension with? What would just blow their mind if you just said what? If you just did something out of character instead of being so predictable? Offered a gift of your heart. So maybe it's offering them encouragement or recognition, or maybe saying I love you and giving them a hug, or maybe saying I miss you, or maybe being gentle in your words, you know, uh, maybe coming home and asking somebody, hey, how was your day today? Or hey, would you like to, go for a walk? Or hey, can I, get you a soda out of the refrigerator, or a drink of water, or a cup of tea, or a coffee? A, a gesture like this that you're not known for, to start to break the pattern, to start to really live in this spirit of forgiveness, giving forth of oneself for the sake of yourself, for the sake of your own integrity. Do it. Do it because it's who you really are. Do it. It's because why else would you be on the planet? Right? I mean, the planet is in need of the real you. So as people gather in small groups this year and stay home, and also for those of you who maybe aren't feeling so good, feeling sad or depressed or anxious, the way to pick up the spirit here is to start being generous. And it doesn't mean having to go out and buy gifts, right? I mean, I'll tell you, there's so many families that I work with that just all they're craving for is kind words. And I mean, words spoken with kindness and with caring and love. So many times we speak and we speak from a place of anger or guilt, or, just selfishness, frustration, and irritation with one another. Speak, but speak kindly. Why? Because that's part of your code of honor. That's a virtue that you hold dear. Do it because it's the right thing to do. Do it because it's who you really are. Do it because it's a way to be true to yourself, and make it unconditional. Doesn't matter what anybody else does. Your goodness is not based on condition. That's a very powerful, strong, mature position to take, or capacity to have. But this is the season, if you will, the historical figures, Santa Claus and Jesus and others who we look up to, you know, uh, carried this spirit and showed us that it could be done. All you have to do, is just take that step. So I hope this video has been helpful, and I wish you all a blessed and good holiday season. Take care.